So, usually when you look at the dashboard of a car, everything makes logical sense, right?
Right, yeah, it's a closed system.
Exactly. Like you press the gas pedal, the tachometer revs up, the speedometer climbs, and you hit the brakes, the needle drops. It's an engineered system built on predictable cause and effect.
Yeah, you know exactly what's going to happen.
But today, if you look at the dashboard of the global economy, I mean, the dials are spinning in completely opposite directions.
Totally.
It's like the engine is roaring, the brakes are smoking, and the GPS just ripped itself off the windshield and threw itself right out the window.
That is honestly the absolute definition of macroeconomic whiplash. I mean, we are looking at a system right now that is fundamentally contradicting itself in real time.
Yeah.
And the traditional gauges we use to measure economic health, they're essentially broken.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today on this deep dive. You, the listener, have picked one of the most chaotic, interconnected, and frankly fascinating news days we've seen in years.
It really is a massive day for news.
It is. And our mission today is to connect the dots for you. We're drawing a direct line from a geopolitical earthquake in the Middle East to a radical shift in how the world's central banks are treating your money.
Right.
And finally, we're going to look at what all of this means for your wallet, just grocery bill and your investments.
Because none of these events exist in a vacuum, right? Like a diplomatic decision made in Geneva ripples through to the price of a gallon of milk in Michigan.
Yeah, it's wild to think about.
It is. And then that milk price, in turn, dictates how, billions of dollars are allocated on Wall Street.
Exactly. So we have a massive stack of sources to get through today. I mean, we are pulling from breaking news dispatches on a brand new, highly conditional U.S.-Iran peace deal.
Which is huge on its own.
Huge. Plus, we've got the latest advanced monthly retail sales data hot off the presses from the U.S. Census Bureau. We are looking at severe agricultural weather alerts from the Midwest, global stock and commodity market analyses, and some critical market-shaking statements from political leaders and the Federal Reserve.
It's a mountain of data, for sure. But, when you lay it all out and look at the underlying mechanics, a very clear, albeit very turbulent picture emerges.
And here is the irony of the day that we're really going to explore. Right now, global oil prices are plummeting at the exact same moment that the U.S. is experiencing its highest inflation rate in 3 years.
A scorching 4.2%.
Yeah, 4.2%. And while all this is happening, Wall Street is in an absolute panic because the new chairman of the Federal Reserve has decided to completely upend how the central bank communicates with the public.
It's like everything is happening everywhere all at once.
It really is. So let's start at the epicenter of this whiplash. Because over the last 100 days, the global economy has been held hostage by war in the Middle East. But today, the headlines are dominated by a sudden cessation of hostilities.
Right, so the breaking news is that a memorandum of understanding, the MOU, has been agreed upon between the United States and Iran. Yeah, and this halts a conflict that has been raging since late February.
Yeah.
And the specific terms of this 14-point draft deal, which was actually mediated by Pakistan and Qatar, they were heavily focused on immediate economic unblocking.
Okay, so what's the timeline on this?
Well, the formal signing is scheduled for Geneva this Friday, June 19th.
Got it. And the key components here are sweeping. We're talking the immediate lifting of the U.S. naval blockade, a permanent ceasefire that crucially includes Lebanon, and the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz to commercial traffic without any tolls.
That last part is massive.
Yeah, and there's also a huge financial lever being pulled, right? The release of $24 billion in frozen Iranian assets.
Yep, $24 billion.
But the catch, and it's a big catch, is that this creates a strict 60-day window to negotiate a final comprehensive agreement on nuclear issues.
Exactly. And the focus for the markets right now is entirely on the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, we don't need to rehash the geography, but the mechanics of shipping through that specific bottleneck are literally what caused the global energy crisis over the last 100 days.
Right, because it handles roughly 20% of the world's total oil and liquefied natural gas, doesn't it?
It does, almost a fifth of the global supply.
Hmm.
And when hostilities broke out, it wasn't just that ships physically couldn't pass. The real issue was that the financial architecture of global shipping just collapsed.
Okay, let's unpack that financial architecture for a second, because I think a lot of people just assume a blockade means like warships physically blocking tankers from moving.
That's right, like a physical wall of ships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really an insurance problem, isn't it?
It is entirely an insurance problem. I mean, commercial shipping relies on these complex syndicates, largely based out of Lloyd's of London, to underwrite the vessels and the cargo.
Okay.
So when a waterway is designated as a high-risk war zone, the war risk premiums just skyrocket.
Wow, so the insurance costs more.
Way more.
Uh-huh.
Over the last 100 days, those premiums reached a point where the cost to insure an oil tanker passing through the strait was actually higher than the profit margin on the oil it was carrying.
Wait, seriously? So they would lose money just by making the trip?
Exactly. The financial incentive to move the energy simply evaporated. You effectively trapped a massive percentage of the world's energy supply behind an uninsurable door.
That is insane.
And that is exactly what sent oil prices surging past $114 a barrel.
And now suddenly, that door's being unlocked. But this 60-day window thing, I am really struggling to see how the market treats this as a real solution.
It's tough.
It feels like we just press pause rather than stop on a movie. I mean, you look at Donald Trump's reaction today. He posted, ships of the world, start your engines, let the oil flow.
Yeah, he authorized the toll-free opening.
He did, and the removal of the blockade. But in the exact same breath, he warned that bombing could resume if Iran doesn't quote-unquote behave.
Right. It is the very definition of a conditional peace.
Mm-hmm.
And, your skepticism is exactly what the logistics companies are grappling with right now.
I mean, how does a global shipping conglomerate even price in a peace deal that might literally only last 2 months? A 60-day ticking clock is just not enough time to overhaul global supply chains.
No, it's not.
You can't just unfreeze a multi-billion-dollar logistics network over a weekend.
You really can't. The shipping industry operates on long-term horizon planning.
Hmm.
I mean, rerouting those massive, very large crude carriers, the VLCCs that requires coordinating port schedules, refinery intakes, and renegotiating those massive insurance contracts we just talked about.
That sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It is. As industry officials note in our sources, fully restoring the logistics pipeline back to 100% capacity, that could take months.
Wow.
Right now, you have over 100 oil-laden ships currently anchored in the Gulf, essentially acting as floating storage facilities, just waiting for the green light.
But the financial markets aren't waiting around for logistics to catch up. The moment the MOU was announced, the commodities market reacted violently.
Oh, massively.
Yeah, Brent crude fell 5.1% today to settle at $78.96 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate dropped to 75.95. That is a massive, rapid deflation in the raw cost of energy from that $114 peak.
Yeah, traders are basically pricing in those floating storage ships flooding the market tomorrow.
They are acting on the assumption of future supply, but this is where the macroeconomic contradiction hits the average person listening to us right now.
Right, because the reality on the ground is different.
Completely different, because while traders in Chicago and London are swapping paper contracts for oil at $76 a barrel today, the actual economic data reflecting consumer reality is, frankly, terrifying.
It's grim.
The May economic data just dropped, and U.S. Consumer Price Index inflation, the CPI, had an annual rate of 4.2%.
Yeah.
That is the highest level we have seen since April 2023. And if you dig into the CPI weighting, over 60% of that inflationary spike was driven entirely by energy costs.
Which makes sense given the last 100 days.
Right. But I have to imagine someone listening to this is furious. I mean, they see headlines about oil dropping, but they are still paying an absolute fortune to fill up their car. It's like slamming on the brakes in a speeding car. You don't stop instantly, you skid.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And the consumer is the one leaving the skid marks here. Economists refer to this temporal disconnect as the hangover effect.
The hangover effect.
Yeah, and it comes down to the mechanics of refinery purchasing contracts. The crude oil being refined into the gasoline you buy today, or, the natural gas powering your home's electricity grid right now, that was not purchased at today's $76 price.
Oh, I see.
Utilities and refineries buy their feedstocks via forward contracts, weeks or even months in advance.
So they were locking in their supply at the height of the war at like $114 a barrel just to ensure they actually had something to process.
Exactly. They paid a massive war premium just to guarantee their physical supply. And those utility companies and refineries, well, they have to pass that locked-in cost onto the consumer to remain solvent.
Right. They can't just eat that loss.
No, they can't. And this is why our sources show energy bills in the United Kingdom are still scheduled to jump 13% in July, despite the peace deal today.
Wow, a 13% jump next month, even though peace was declared today.
Exactly. The supply chain acts as a delay mechanism. So consumers today are paying for the geopolitical panic of April, while commodities traders are already buying the diplomatic optimism of June.
That is brutal. But the optimism of June might be setting us up for a completely different kind of crisis anyway.
Yeah, it could.
Because if we look slightly further down the road, the International Energy Agency just issued a warning about a looming supply surplus in 2027. We are just coming out of a catastrophic scarcity, and now they're projecting global oil supply to rise by 8 million barrels a day, while global demand only grows by 2 million barrels a day.
That 6 million barrel per day delta is just staggering.
It's massive.
It really highlights the capital expenditure cycle in the energy sector because, when prices spike to $114, every oil producer in the world is incentivized to drill more, pump more, and invest heavily in extraction infrastructure.
Because the profit margins are just irresistible at that price point.
Precisely. But the thing is, bringing a new oil field online takes years. So the investment made during this scarcity of today results in a massive oversupply tomorrow.
Right.
We are swinging wildly on a pendulum. We went from an inflationary energy shock caused by a geopolitical blockade to a future where we might see a market-crashing glut of oil.
And navigating the whiplash of that pendulum swing is exactly what brings us to the chaos at the world's central banks today.
Oh yeah, this is where it gets really complicated.
Because inflation is running incredibly hot at 4.2% right now due to that hangover effect, central banks are forced to make immediate policy choices based on delayed data.
And the divergence in global monetary policy right now is really striking. Like the Bank of England just announced they're holding their interest rates at 3.75%, and they explicitly cited the uncertainty of the energy hangover.
Makes sense.
But then the European Central Bank, looking at the exact same global data, decided to raise rates. And Bank of Japan just raised their benchmark rate to 1%, which is a 3-decade high for an economy that has relied on zero or negative interest rates for a generation.
A 3-decade high in Japan. That just shows you the scale of this. But the real earthquake today happened in Washington, D.C.
Oh, definitely.
Because this was the first Federal Open Market Committee meeting under the leadership of the new Fed chairman, Kevin Warsh. And the actual rate decision wasn't the surprise. The Fed held the federal funds rate steady at 3.50 to 3.75%. The shock came from the dot plot.
Right. And just to clarify, the dot plot is essentially an anonymous survey.
Okay, how does that work?
It's a chart where each of the 18 Fed policymakers places a dot representing where they believe the key short-term interest rate should be at the end of the year and into the future.
And today's dot plot was a total bombshell. Despite oil prices falling off a cliff today, 9 out of those 18 policymakers predict at least one rate hike by the end of 2026.
Half of them.
Half. Fed funds futures, which, traders use to hedge against rate moves, instantly jumped to an 84% probability of a rate hike. But it's not just the dots that have people freaking out. Warsh is fundamentally changing the philosophy of the Fed. He is officially ending the era of forward guidance.
Yeah, and to understand why Wall Street is panicking about this, you have to understand how dependent they had become on forward guidance.
Yeah, right, it was like a crutch.
A huge crutch. Since the 2008 financial crisis, the Federal Reserve operated on a policy of extreme transparency. They would use Fed whisperers in the financial press, drop deliberate hints in speeches, and use highly specific adjectives in their press releases just to choreograph their moves months in advance.
They were essentially handing Wall Street the answer key before the test. Like, we will not raise rates until unemployment hits exactly X%.
Yes, exactly. And it suppressed market volatility because it pretty much eliminated surprise. But Warsh's argument is that forward guidance structurally traps the central bank.
How?
Well, if you promise the market a rate cut, but then a war breaks out in the Middle East and inflation unexpectedly spikes to 4.2%, you are trapped.
Oh, I see.
If you break your promise, the market crashes because you destroyed your credibility. But if you keep your promise and cut rates during an inflationary spike, you risk hyperinflation.
So Warsh is taking away the answer key. He wants the markets to react to the actual incoming economic data rather than trying to parse the tone of a Fed official's speech at an economics luncheon.
He is forcing the market to price in reality, not Fed expectations. He is taking away the GPS.
I get the theory, I really do. But here's my problem with Warsh flying blind based on the data. The data is completely contradictory.
It is a mess right now.
If 9 out of 18 Fed members want a rate hike, which data are they looking at? Are they looking at the rearview mirror at the 4.2% inflation of the past, which we know is a hangover from a war that just ended? Or are they looking through the windshield at the 60-day peace deal and plummeting crude prices?
That ambiguity is exactly why ending forward guidance is creating so much immediate volatility today. The market literally doesn't know the Fed's reaction function anymore. And, you have to layer the intense political pressure over this entire mechanism.
Oh man, the political tug of war here is brutal, and it really illustrates how hard it is to operate a central bank based purely on data. And we should be clear, we are absolutely not endorsing either political side here, just reporting what the sources show.
Right, just looking at the pressures they face.
Exactly. So Donald Trump is aggressively demanding that the Fed slash interest rates immediately. His economic argument is that lower borrowing costs will stimulate business investment and drive GDP growth.
Which is common. Sitting administrations generally advocate for lower interest rates because, cheap mortgages and a surging stock market look great on an incumbent's economic scorecard.
Right. But on the flip side, Senator Elizabeth Warren released a blistering statement accusing Trump of attempting to illegally take over the Federal Reserve to force these cuts.
Yeah, that was a strong statement.
Very. Her position is that the 4.2% inflation wasn't a natural economic cycle. She argues it was actively fueled by the administration's own tariff policies and the geopolitical instability with Iran.
Right.
So she views high prices as a direct result of administration policy and argues that stripping the Fed's independence to artificially lower rates is dangerous. Again, we're not taking a side, just reporting how intense this is.
And regardless of the politics, this intense public pressure is precisely the environment Warsh is trying to navigate by abandoning forward guidance.
How does that help him?
Well, when the Fed gives forward-looking hints, those hints become instantly politicized. By tying policy rigidly to hard, retrospective data, like the monthly CPI, Warsh is attempting to build a firewall. He's trying to insulate the institution by saying, hey, the math dictates the policy, not the pressure.
But again, if Warsh is tying policy to the math is currently painting a deeply deceptive picture of the average American's life.
Yeah, the retail data is a perfect example of that.
It really is. We just got the May 2026 advance monthly sales report from the U.S. Census Bureau. And on the surface, the headline number looks fantastic. Total retail sales for May grew 0.9% month over month, hitting $763.7 billion.
Sounds great on paper.
Yeah. Year over year, retail sales are up 6.9%. If you just read the summary, you'd think the consumer is completely shrugging off the 4.2% inflation.
But you have to look at the methodology behind those Census Bureau numbers. The critical footnote in that report is that these figures are adjusted for seasonal variation, but they are not adjusted for price changes.
Which means the 4.2% inflation is baked directly into that 0.9% growth.
Entirely. The growth is basically an illusion created by the devaluation of the dollar. When we disaggregate the report and look at specific sectors, the reality of the consumer squeeze becomes painfully obvious. Like, sales at gasoline stations were up 12.9% in a single month.
Right, and people aren't driving 13% further to get to work.
Exactly.
They're just paying the hangover war premium at the pump.
Yep. That 12.9% jump in gas station sales isn't economic expansion. It is an unavoidable inflation tax. And that tax drains disposable income, which shows up immediately in discretionary spending. For example, furniture and home furnishing stores saw sales decline by 3.1%.
I am really struggling to square that 3.1% decline in furniture with one of the most bizarre stock market anomalies of the day.
Oh, the lazy boy thing.
Yes, Lazy Boy stock jumped 14.8% on remarkably strong earnings. How does a company selling reclining chairs defy a sector-wide slump when everyone else is cutting back on big-ticket items?
It's such a fascinating case study in market segmentation and demographic resilience. While the aggregate consumer is clearly tapped out by the inflation tax, Lazy Boy's earnings report noted they actually benefited from revenue in newly opened stores. Yeah, their CFO maintained a measured view of the broad sales environment, acknowledging the headwinds. But it suggests that older, wealthier, or more geographically insulated demographics, people who are perhaps less sensitive to daily gas price fluctuations or who own their homes outright and aren't affected by current 7% mortgage rates, they are still spending.
That makes sense. But for the broader consumer, it's just a brutal environment. And the data we are getting from the agricultural sector suggests it is about to get much, much worse.
Yeah, the weather reports.
Right. We've been talking about the potential relief coming from the drop in oil prices, but there's an entirely different supply shock developing in the Midwest.
The reports from the Midwestern Regional Climate Center are really alarming for anyone tracking future food inflation. A climatologist there, Jacob Dollinger, warned of highly unusual extreme mid-June weather just decimating the eastern Corn Belt.
Where specifically?
We're talking Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and Iowa.
We are talking about weather systems producing 50-mile-per-hour winds, golf ball-sized hail, and widespread tornadoes. And golf ball-sized hail in mid-June doesn't just bruise a crop, right? It structurally destroys it during a critical growth phase.
Yeah, because mid-June is often when corn approaches the tasseling phase. If the stalk is destroyed by hail now, there is literally no time to replant for the season. You just lose the crop.
Wow.
And the Eastern Corn Belt is the foundation of the domestic agricultural economy. The destruction of corn and soybeans isn't just about the price of cereal. These are the primary feedstocks for livestock.
Which means the damage instantly transmits into the commodities markets for meat and dairy.
Correct. The feed-to-weight ratio for cattle means that if corn prices spike, the cost to raise a cow skyrockets. We are looking at massive upward pressure on futures for live cattle, lean hogs, and Class 3 milk, which is the benchmark contract for cheese and dairy production.
It's economic whack-a-mole.
Totally.
You smash down the energy inflation mallet with a geopolitical peace deal, and the food inflation mole pops right back up because of a hailstorm in Iowa. If the cost of your groceries goes up by the exact amount your gas bill went down, the overall CPI stays at 4.2%.
And this is where it all ties back to the Fed.
Exactly. Because Chairman Warsh threw away the forward guidance GPS, the market is terrified that the Fed might actually hike interest rates to fight this food inflation, even though making a car loan more expensive does absolutely nothing to fix a destroyed soybean crop.
That is the inherent frustrating limitation of monetary policy. The Federal Reserve uses a blunt macroeconomic tool, the cost of capital, to try and fix microeconomic supply chain issues.
Right.
They can crush consumer demand by making borrowing prohibitive, but they cannot engineer more oil, and they certainly cannot shield a cornfield from a tornado.
So, with the consumer trapped in this cycle and the Fed refusing to hold Wall Street's hand anymore, the massive corporations that drive the stock market are being forced to radically adapt.
And we really saw that in the markets today.
We did. The market reaction today was incredibly fractured. The Dow Jones Industrial Average hit a record high, up 328 points, but the Nasdaq sank 1.2%, and the broader S&P 500 dropped 0.6%.
That divergence tells a really interesting story about capital allocation right now. The Dow represents traditional blue-chip industrials and financials companies that generate immediate cash flow.
Okay.
The Nasdaq is heavy on technology and growth, and the specific names dragging it down signal a massive sentiment shift. NVIDIA was down 2.4%, Broadcom dropped 4.4%, and Micron Technology absolutely plummeted 6.2%.
For the last 2 years, the market has thrown infinite money at the infrastructure of artificial intelligence. You know, the companies designing the chips, the physical hardware, the data centers. But today, investors are violently rotating out of hardware speculation.
They are. They are moving from theoretical infrastructure to applied utility. And the M&A news today, the mergers and acquisitions, perfectly illustrates this.
Look at SpaceX. They just acquired an AI coding startup called Cursor for $60 billion.
That number is just wild.
$60 billion. And the market loved it. SpaceX stock jumped 4.8%. Now, I understand Cursor is a highly regarded coding assistant, but how does an aerospace company justify spending $60 billion on a software tool?
Because in modern aerospace engineering, the physical hardware of a rocket is entirely dependent on the software that controls its telemetry, its guidance, and its autonomous docking systems.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, by integrating an advanced AI coding assistant directly into their engineering workflow, SpaceX isn't just buying software. They are buying the ability to exponentially accelerate their rapid prototyping and iteration cycles. It is immediate functional utility applied directly to their core business model.
The market is demanding actual results. The era of buying a chip manufacturer and just hoping someone figures out how to use the chips is over. They want to see how AI improves efficiency today. We also saw Yum Brands announcing the sale of Pizza Hut to a private equity firm, Long Range Capital, for $2.7 billion. That feels like a classic defensive consolidation, right? Or just shedding a massive operational asset to streamline in a tight consumer environment.
Yes, shedding weight. But the most illuminating corporate move of the day, the one that perfectly encapsulates this chaotic intersection of high interest rates and the squeezed consumer, comes from Bed Bath & Beyond.
Oh my gosh, this blew my mind. Bed Bath & Beyond announced they are acquiring Fathom Holdings for approximately $53.38 million in an all-stock transaction at an exchange ratio of 0.2236 shares.
Yep.
But Fathom Holdings isn't a retail supplier. They are a technology-driven real estate services platform.
They do everything.
They run residential brokerages, mortgage services, title insurance, and a SaaS platform, software as a service for real estate agents called IntelliAgents. Why on earth is a company famous for selling towels and toasters buying a mortgage underwriter?
They're calling it the Everything Home Strategy.
The everything home strategy.
Yeah, and it is a desperate but honestly fascinating attempt at vertical integration in a really hostile macroeconomic environment. You have to look at the housing data. With interest rates hovering where they are and the Fed projecting potential hikes, the housing market is completely frozen. Our sources show May housing starts dropped to just 1.17 million.
Because nobody's taking out a 7% mortgage to build a new house right now.
Exactly. And Bed Bath & Beyond's entire retail model is highly correlated with home turnover.
Right.
When people buy new houses, they buy new sheets, new coffee makers, new decor. If the velocity of home sales drops to zero, Bed Bath & Beyond's foot traffic just collapses.
So instead of waiting for the Fed to lower rates and thaw out the housing market, they are trying to own the friction itself.
Pretty much. They are attempting to capture the consumer at the very beginning of the life cycle. The strategy is to acquire the homebuyer through the Fathom brokerage, underwrite their mortgage, secure the title, and then seamlessly integrate the retail furnishing of that home right into the closing process.
Wow.
Furthermore, acquiring Fathom's SaaS platform provides Bed Bath & Beyond with recurring software revenue from real estate agents, and that acts as a hedge against the cyclical, volatile nature of big box retail.
But the operational logistics of this are just staggering. I mean, integrating a complex, highly regulated financial services branch and a decentralized network of real estate agents into the corporate structure of a big box retailer, that sounds like an absolute nightmare.
Oh, it's going to be incredibly difficult.
Is a retail cashier going to pre-qualify you for a home loan? Is Bed Bath & Beyond selling you a mortgage the brilliant future of retail survival, or is it just a catastrophic overextension by a company terrified of a frozen housing market?
It is an incredibly high-risk gamble, but it proves the overarching point of our entire analysis today. When the central bank takes away the forward guidance GPS and leaves interest rates high, and the consumer is battered by unpredictable waves of energy and food inflation, the traditional business models break down. You can no longer survive by just selling towels. You are forced to become a vertically integrated financial and technology platform just to weather the volatility.
Man, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. Let's just trace the through line of these sources one more time to see how it all connects for you.
Sounds good.
We started with a fragile 60-day diplomatic timer in the Middle East that unblocked the Strait of Hormuz, sending global oil futures into a free fall as traders priced in a flood of supply.
Right.
But because of the mechanical lag in refinery, purchasing that hangover effect, the consumer is still absorbing the wartime prices, resulting in a scorching 4.2% inflation rate.
And that retrospective inflation data forced the Federal Reserve to hold rates high, while Chairman Kevin Warsh fundamentally altered the landscape by ending forward guidance. He has forced the market to fly blind, reacting only to incoming data while navigating intense political pressure from all sides.
Meanwhile, you, the consumer, are suffocating under an inflation tax that is masquerading as retail growth. And just as the energy squeeze might start to abate, extreme hail and tornadoes in the eastern Corn Belt are threatening to destroy the foundational crops of the agricultural supply chain.
Which sets us up for a brutal transition from energy inflation directly into food inflation.
Exactly. All of which culminates in a corporate landscape that is violently reallocating capital. The market is shifting billions away from speculative AI hardware into applied, functional software like SpaceX's acquisition of Cursor, while legacy retailers like Bed Bath & Beyond are forced into radical, high-risk acquisitions of mortgage platforms just to maintain a pulse in a paralyzed housing market.
It is a profound interconnected web of cause and effect.
It really is. And before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Given everything we've synthesized from these sources today, what is the ultimate takeaway here?
Well, if you look at the architecture of the global economy over the last 2 decades, it relied heavily on institutions acting as shock absorbers.
Okay, like who?
Like central banks providing forward guidance to soothe the markets, or geopolitical alliances providing long-term predictability for supply chains. But today, the sources are telling a completely different story. The Fed is intentionally embracing unpredictability by destroying the market's answer key. Global conflicts aren't being resolved with lasting treaties, but with highly conditional 60-day pauses.
Yeah, temporary band-aids.
Right. If the institutions that used to provide baseline stability are now actively retreating from that role, we have to ask, are we entering a permanent era of high volatility economics?
Wow.
And if so, does the everyday investor, the person listening right now, do they have to completely tear up their financial playbook? Because the old strategies built on slow, predictable growth and institutional handholding may simply no longer function in a world where the GPS is permanently turned off.
That is a staggering question to consider. The dashboard is broken, the dials are spinning everywhere, and the GPS is gone. We are all just going to have to look out the windshield and navigate the road as it comes. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We know it's dense, complicated material, but hopefully the underlying mechanics of how this world actually operates make a little bit more sense now. Stay curious, keep questioning the headlines, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.